In last week's episode, we explored Australia's rich history in space, seeing that in addition to the 60,000 years of First Nations astronomical knowledge, Australia has also contributed significantly to the global space sector. Today, we bring you a special episode that again demonstrates Australia's involvement in the sector. An interview with an astronaut, an Australian astronaut, Katherine Benell-Pegg. Although there have been other Australians that have gone on to become astronauts, Katherine is the first to be trained under the Australian flag, a huge achievement for Katherine and our nation. Katherine recently travelled to the top end, where she gave presentations to inspire the next generation, including First Nations, on the opportunities in space. During her trip, Katherine visited Teabba HQ and spoke to Teabba broadcasters about these opportunities and provided insights on what it's like to be an astronaut. So, without further ado, welcome to episode 5 of our series, an interview with an astronaut.
We are here with Katherine Benell-Pegg, the first person to be trained as an astronaut under the Australian flag. Katherine is now a fully trained astronaut and works with the Australian Space Agency, where among other things, she is working to inspire others about the opportunities in space. Welcome to the show, Katherine. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on here at Teabba. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's excellent to have you in the studio. Of course, we had a little bit of a chat out there earlier on about some of the stuff that you do in space. But for those that don't know, tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from.
So, my name's Katherine. I'm from Curl on the northern beaches of Sydney, which is Gundagai land, and I currently live at West Beach in Adelaide on Kaurna country. And, for me, ever since I grew up in Sydney, I remember lying on the grass being mesmerised by the stars, and when my mum would tell me stories about the stars and that no one had ever been up close to another planet before, childlike drive and curiosity really drew me to want to be an astronaut, to be an explorer of other worlds. That same feeling, kids get when they want to look under a rock or climb every tree, or that sense of awe when you stand on a mountaintop. That's that same feeling that drew me to want to be an astronaut and draws a lot of people to want to explore our world.
Was there any movie or was there anything that you seen when you were younger that may have sort of got you thinking about space and wanting to be a part of space?
For me, there were lots and lots of things that made me want to do space. For me, there were so many different factors that made me want to explore space. And there was not just one thing, but I used to like reading the stories of the space explorers and hearing, stories about the stars. And I really liked the movie The Dish, which was a movie about Australia receiving the signal for the moon landing and the TV out in regional New South Wales. And I actually did my year 10 school work experience out there, and it made me realize that to work in space you don't have to be a superhero or a genius, you just have to love the topic, and if you work hard at it you can absolutely get there, even here in Australia.
Tell us a little bit about your journey in becoming an astronaut.
So for me, I wanted to be an astronaut ever since I was a little kid with stars in my eyes, and when I was at high school I was determined to be an astronaut and said so at my first kind of careers discussions in year 8, and rather than laugh at me or anything like that, my school and my parents said, well, go and figure out what that would take, probably hoping that I'd see some sense then and see how unlikely it would be. But actually what I found out egged me on, it spurred me on, because I heard that to be an astronaut you have to have another career first. So you have to have a STEM career. So you can be a scientist, you can be an engineer, you can be a pilot, or you can be a doctor. You should be someone that likes expeditions outdoors and camping. You should be into team activities like team sports and be fit, and you'll get the chance to travel the world and learn lots about science. I was like, that sounds great. There's no downside there. I knew how hard it would be though, because at that time Australia didn't have an Australian Space Agency, let alone a pathway to be an astronaut. But I applied to study engineering and physics at university. I knew if you wanted to be an astronaut you had to work hard at school and on your character, and you had to have a uni degree. So I applied to study the engineering degree that had the word space in the title because I like space. I didn't know much about engineering. I'd never written a line of code or, not even used a drill. I wasn't very hands-on, but I learned to get along with it at uni, and I put in the effort, and I'm so glad I did, because becoming an engineer, a space engineer, has taken me all over the world. I've got to live in 6 countries, many more than once. I got to live above the polar circle in the Arctic at a rocket range launching high altitude balloons. I got to develop new space stations and satellites that help monitor our planet, and just be really creative in helping to solve problems and be at the center of discovery every day. And it was about 5 years ago when the Australian Space Agency set up. They set up 6 years ago, but 5 years ago they started hiring in the technical team, and I applied thinking I wouldn't be qualified enough yet. I only had about 10 years of experience, but they hired me and my husband. Yeah, well, I was still really excited when they hired me and my husband back, and I could finally come back to Australia and here and helping Australians to benefit from space more. And it's been an incredible journey doing that. And it was in 2021, I think it was, when the European Space Agency opened their first call for astronauts in almost 15 years. And I finally got my chance to apply because I had a UK passport. And I went through a 1.5 year selection, 6 knockout rounds. It was just like the movies. You did stress tests, medical tests, all this stuff. And each time I got through, it was like, whoa, how is this happening? And I just kept going. And at the end, they chose, they wrote to Australia and said, we'll take her if she represents Australia. And Australia, I'm so grateful, said yes. And so now I get to proudly represent Australia to the astronaut community and to international human spaceflight. And I got to do the astronaut training, which took 1.5 years. Because when you first pick to be an astronaut, you're not called an astronaut straight away. You're called an ASCAN, which stands for astronaut candidate. And you go through the basic training for just over 1 year for me. I'm in a class, and my class is a class of 6. We're called the Hoppers, named in part because Australia was part of it for the first time, and people liked how kangaroos move forward rather than backwards and that kind of thing. But that was an incredible adventure, that training, and it was only once I graduated earlier this year that I could call myself an astronaut and be mission ready for mission assignment.
What was your favorite thing about training, and what was your least favorite thing?
My favorite thing about training was 2 things. One was the people I got to train with, and all the people around us at the Astronaut Centre. Everyone was just so passionate about what they did and were experts in their field, and I was just learning all the time. I love learning and I love ideas, and just that pursuit of understanding was amazing. And I was blown away by how much amazing science can be done in space that you can't do on Earth when you remove gravity, the gravity vector, and things are floating around. I also really enjoyed the team I was with. Everyone's from different cultures and backgrounds, and we all shared in that experience together. We all had different strengths and weaknesses and helped each other through the training. And the hardest thing, there were 2 hard things, I think, for me particularly. One was pacing myself. Over 1 year, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you've got to make sure that you leave energy for the next lesson, for the next day, for the next week, and also for your family as well. And because everything was so interesting and all the teachers would hunt down answers to any question we had, as a curious person, you just want to keep going. But no, you have to learn when enough's enough and to take a breath. And the other hard thing was I'm really not good at learning languages. We had to learn Russian because part of the space station's in Russian, and it's important for crew cohesion up there as well to get along as a team. And we had 8 weeks of lessons, and we had to get from learning the alphabet to, advanced Russian. And that was tough for me, but because I knew it would be hard for me from the beginning, I just put in the effort from day one, and I got through it, which I'm really proud of. And I think that's a message I try and give to kids I speak to today, which is that, even on astronaut training, effort matters more than talent alone. Talent just makes it faster or easier, but you still have to put that effort in. And if you put the effort into something, which is easier when you like it, when you put the effort into something, it's always going to be to your benefit.
So what is next for you? When do you think you will be up in space in the future?
Oh, we'll see. So when I graduated from astronaut training earlier this year, it meant I'm mission assignment ready to go to the space station for a long duration mission of say 6 months or so is typical, or even 1 day to the moon. But we'll see, should I go to space? And if so, when? That's a decision for Australia to take when the time is right to take it. And, our space agency is 6 years old now, so it's still pretty young. Our space sector is really emerging. So let's see what the future holds. Of course, it would be an honor to go to space, and it'll be a bit disappointing if I don't, but I've now got the knowledge to help the next person that does from Australia. And there's so many capable people here that I think our future in space in many areas is bright.
So what would be your advice to anybody, any young kids that might want to think about pursuing a career in space?
Yeah, to young kids that want to pursue a career in space, I say back yourself. You can absolutely do this. Why not you? And, if you're passionate about something, you'll get good at it and you'll enjoy putting in the effort. And if you pursue things you enjoy, yes, at times it will be hard work, but it will pay off. So for kids that want to work in space or in a technical field, you should put in the effort at school, turn up to school, do your best, and, also work on your character. Do stuff outside school in groups or that pushes you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
See how you react when you're under stress. Do you get angry? Do you get quiet? And then work on that so you can be good under stress, and that will set you in good stead. But to a lot of kids today, like when they're still working 50 years from now, who knows what the world will be like? 55 years ago, there were people on the moon, right? And they couldn't have imagined the world we'd have today. But what you can do is give yourself the right skills and knowledge and behaviors that you can be part of solving problems our world, our communities need solved throughout your whole life, whatever that may be. And STEM sets you up really well for that. And if you don't want to work in STEM, but you want to work in space, there's lots of jobs there too. And just pursue your ambition and think what you want to contribute. And then the B part, what you be, will fall out of that.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us today, Katherine. We appreciate your time and look forward to hearing about all the exciting things you have in the future. And it was a pleasure having you in to speak with the guests that we had earlier on, and of course speak on the Teabba Radio Network to let us all know about space. And hopefully that you've inspired somebody today to make that step to want to have a look a little bit more into space and be a part of, space here in Australia as it's growing so much. And you mentioned it's only been 5 years, but it's growing very quickly, and we're seeing a lot more to do with space here in Australia. So thank you very much.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. As we've seen in the last 2 episodes, Australia has and continues to contribute significantly to the global space sector. And Australia now has an astronaut trained under the Australian flag. But it's not only astronauts that work in space. In fact, there are opportunities in space for everyone. And you don't need to be an engineer, scientist, or even go to university to be part of the sector. Next week, we will talk more about these opportunities and what you can do if you like to be involved in the sector. As always, if you want to learn more about what you heard today, we'll put some links up on our social media. Until next time.